that's such a joy around here. Yeah.
Oh, that's extraordinary. Thank you. It's like for us, I'm just really fascinated by people's relationships with their places, with their environments, and especially how that becomes, whether it's like a ritual, whether that becomes part of your kind of your own mythologies, you know what I mean? Like the way you connect to those places, and then how that goes into things like your practice, because it opens up their whole kind of imaginary worlds and the way in which you define things visually and things. So I think that's fascinating. And I was going to ask, Sara, if she wanted to go next, really. Then Angela, and then Mum or Margaret.
I can carry on, that's fine. So I'm Sara Trillo, I'm a visual artist, and I find it quite hard defining my practice because it's multifaceted, but I think fundamentally it's about excavation. So it's a kind of physical excavation of places and finding materials at those sites, but it's also excavating stories and narratives. And kind of a bit different to the rest of you in that I'm Kentish and local, but I live in Sandwich and I see Thanet as an island, and I'm on the other side of the island, and that's kind of quite important to my working practice, because I do quite a lot of work with the kind of trying to excavate the mythologies of Thanet when it was an island. So the location of being across the river and crossing to the island seems quite significant. And I too was born in Ramsgate. Well, I was brought up in Margate till I was 7, but there wasn't a maternity unit at Margate Hospital then. And then I moved away and lived in Warwickshire and Norfolk and London, but came back. But I've always sort of been sighted across from the island, and it's always been, even when I was a child, there was a toll bridge that you went across to get to Thanet. So I have this relationship with Thanet as being this other place. I find stories about it. And I think the other thing that I find, sort of being an older artist, is I feel like the reason why the tidal spaces are really important is there's still these sort of empty sites that you can walk through where there's space, but the island is actually being really built up. So I find it quite heartbreaking how the sort of building is just expanding over the island and everything's just being despoiled. So I find these sort of tidal spaces as a place where there's still a kind of chance to walk out into this sort of more unblemished landscape and connect with sort of past times and ancestors without sort of finding structures in the way, I guess.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to find places in Thanet. I sort of look on maps and try and find places which are the gaps on the map, the spaces on the map, and try and find out what happened in those spaces. So one of the places I'm researching at the moment is a lost medieval village called Chouart, which is just a tiny, it's now just a beautiful farmstead that's near St Nicholas at Wade, but it was once had an amazing medieval church, and it's officially a lost medieval village, and the church served Reculver. So it's kind of, again, Reculver's the other side of the island. So it's that relationship with the island again and these routeways. And the other space I've been investigating, which is really hard to link up with the map, is the St Mildred's Lynch, which is this story of a deer that ran across the island and created this boundary line across the island that was probably a sort of historic ridgeway, but actually was, it's been written about in the 18th century as already having been kind of removed by farmers. So it doesn't exist, but I've been trying to trace all the maps and walk those routes and then find materials from these places to make work with. And I suppose I'm quite rooted in the past, but I've got an interest in archaic ways of making. So I've just really been exploring ways of working with these materials, from flint knapping to bronze casting, but bronze casting in a very in the same way that prehistoric man would have bronze cast. So, you build a smelting furnace and melt malachite to make the bronze, rather than going into a foundry and doing it professionally. And trying to learn about glass making and very ancient processes. And I think this year, because of lockdown, had more limited options, or last year. So I've actually been doing a lot of work, obviously not with the same level of knowledge as Lynn, but trying to find plants and dyeing from them, and just using locally foraged material to make work with. Yeah. So
Wow.
It's very much a connection with place, and I'm sounding a bit rambling, but it's kind of very multifaceted. I've been doing a lot of writing as well, so I'm not quite sure where my practice sits at the moment. Maybe I should just say I'm a sort of maker, and maker covers a lot of possibilities.
Yay. Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you for that, Sarah. I swear, I met Sarah during doing this commission, and you just kind of, and I don't really it reads me because every time she speaks, I just kind of fall in love with the next kind of project and thing that she's talking about, because I just find it fascinating. I love that. I love those historical aspects. I love that kind of historical kind of ecological narratives and things. They're just fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think when I was at your studio, was it when you were telling me about those islands, those shifting islands that are there, then they disappear? I mean, they were fascinating. Where was that again?
That's the Goodwin Sands. So that's one of the other things I've been exploring. So you probably all know about the Goodwin Sands in the middle of the English Channel. And in medieval legend, they were an island called Lamia. And the legend is that Lamia was inundated because the king at the time didn't pay the monks the money to sort of build protective walls. The money got diverted. I think it went to Tenterden to pay for a church in Tenterden. So the island was inundated in about the 10th century. And I think it's been fairly roundly proved that there probably wasn't an island there. It's all part of the Doggerland and connecting us. But I mean, one of the things I've been writing about over 2020 is this island as a mythological space, but actually imagining myself inhabiting it. And I've been fusing together the sort of mythologies of Reculver, where that's faced inundation, and some of the other narratives of Thanet. But also when I started writing it, it's also a kind of Brexit thing as well, because I was thinking about Doggerland connecting us to France, and then this island's kind of being submerged because it's probably what I think's happening to Britain at the moment. Anyway, won't get political, but so the Goodwins are also Goodwin Sands are somewhere that's very, I've been there a few times, and they're kind of odd, eerie, shifting sandbanks that you can visit for maybe an hour at a time, or else you run the risk of being drowned. So yeah, I like that. I think that's the other thing I maybe should have said. The reason I like these tidal spaces is they're so fleeting, they're so liminal. You've got in Sandwich, because I live in Sandwich and I go to the bay a lot, and there's lots of wrecks that get exposed, but you have to go out at a really, really super low tide, and then you can find a wreck, but then you've literally got a few minutes before the tide turns and starts coming back in again. So I kind of like the kind of fact that the tide is constantly changing, it's shifting, it's erasing things. It's this kind of time capsule that's going on. You're walking on sort of fossils that are millions of years old, and things are being washed up that are contemporary plastic, and it's all at the kind of mercy of the tide. So
you've been to the hidden port?
Sorry?
Have you been to the hidden port?
Where's the hidden port?
Sandwich.
Oh,
they used it to
You mean Richborough, Lynn?
Yeah,
I've never heard it.
Fascinating. That is absolutely amazing, that place.
No, it's the spring tides are the best to see all the kind of exposed wrecks, and
yeah.
Oh wow, thank you so much. That's fascinating. I just like the idea that all these wrecks even come up.